Immigration attorney Sharifa Tharpe. I'm here live to take your U.S. immigration related questions. Go ahead and put your questions in the comments now so I can answer your questions as soon as I'm done with mine. Now, hi, thanks so much for the love and positive vibes. I appreciate it. Now, I have a really good topic, and you guys need to pay attention to this very carefully because I know it's a question that a lot of people, they want to know the answer to it. It may not be as straightforward, but I'm going to tell you how I go about getting people work permits even after they've overstayed. But I want to also caution you at the same time about the consequences of overstaying a visa because not everyone qualifies for a work permit. So, I've had a number of calls where people think that just by overstaying, they can just, get a work permit. And it doesn't work that way. I do help people who happen to overstay. I don't necessarily seek out people who've overstayed, but I help people who to get the work permit despite the overstay. And so this is where I want you to identify the differences and um, understand how I go about making an evaluation. And then also thinking about the consequences to you, because I know things are tough outside of, it's tough here in the US, much less other countries where jobs are not as available. And so a lot of people end up coming here looking for better opportunities, and they seriously are considering overstaying. This is the point where you definitely need to seek legal advice. Do not make that decision first and then seek legal advice afterwards, because I've seen it burn a lot of people by doing it that way. You want to understand all the implications involved before making any decisions. So, let me go ahead and answer this simply, and then we'll get into the complex part about this. Can I get a work permit after overstaying? The general rule is no. You cannot just get a work permit after overstaying. However, you may qualify at the same time for an immigration benefit despite overstaying. And that is what gets you to the work permit. And that is what I evaluate. Whether, despite the overstay, did something happen? Is there some circumstance in this client's background that then opens the door for them to qualify? So, if you are thinking about overstaying because you just think you can just apply for a work permit, think again. Um, the thing you're going to hear me say is you must qualify in some way. It's not going to be a situation where you're just going to come here with a visa and then get a work permit. Because remember, especially those of you who are coming here to the U.S. with a visitor's visa, you're not supposed to work on that visitor's visa in the first place. So they're not going to make it very easy for you to then get a work permit to stay here, right? So, how do I go about getting the work permit for someone who has overstayed? Because that is one of the things I do is I do look for those alternatives. So, how do I go about that? Because when I do talk to um, individuals in consultations and I've identified that they've overstayed, then my next thing is to advise them that yes, after an overstay, your options become limited. However, it doesn't mean that you have zero options. And I go through a list of those possible options that are available despite the overstay. So, what kinds of situations can open up the door for a work permit even after overstaying? So the number one thing is if an employer is telling you to just go ahead, overstay, and they'll get you your work permit or your green card or your papers, be very cautious because that employer does not mean you well. Either they don't mean you well, or they're trying to fraudulently get you to work for them because now they know you want the papers, or they don't know the law and they don't realize that they cannot do that. They cannot have you working for them and then file for your papers. So if any employer tells you, come work for me first and then we'll work on the papers afterwards, lie. It is not true. So that's the first thing. Don't fall for that scam. Make sure you talk to the employer about filing the papers first, because that's how you're going to get to the work permit. That's how you're going to get to the green card. Is the employer has to be involved in your process and they have to file the papers before you start to work for them. So no work until you get those papers. That is the way it goes. And this is what usually opens up the door for me to find many of my clients have been the victim of this. And as a result of being the victim of this, they do qualify for T status, based on labor trafficking through fraud, because in some cases the employer knows exactly what they're doing, so they recruit the employer with the intention of getting them to work for them, with the promise of getting them their work permit, getting them their papers, knowing very well they cannot do it. This employer knows they cannot do it, but the immigrant, usually my clients, don't know this. They trust the employer. They think this is completely feasible, that they would start working for the employer first before getting their papers, right? They think they have to earn it. So some of my clients have explained that they think they have to earn the papers. So they have to earn the trust of the employer. And so if the employer is giving them the condition that they have to work for them first to get the papers, they go ahead along with it because they think that's the legal way to do it, when it really is not. So if the one way is when I talk to clients and I find this out, it means they've been the victim of fraud and they were forced into an employment situation, forced to work for someone based on this lie that the employer willfully told to get them to work. So that is one way that where I really dig into the circumstances of my clients to determine whether, despite the overstay, do they qualify for T status. And in this case, many times the overstay is as a result of the promise of the employer. The employer says, stay and I'll get you the papers. Now, this doesn't necessarily, another thing is you could be here for years. You could be here for 20 years, and then an employer comes along and tells you the same thing. Say, hey, you've been here for a while. I can help you fix your papers, but you're going to have to work for me. That is still considered trafficking by fraud. And usually it comes with a lot of other things. The employer starts to take advantage of them because now they have them right where they want them. Um, and so that's one of the ways that I determine whether someone who's overstayed can qualify for T status, which gets them the work permit at the same time. So with T status, they get their 4-year work permit and social security number, and they also then get the opportunity to apply for the green card after being approved for T status. So that's one way. Now, the other is usually usually there is the family ties, right? So sometimes you have spouses, they're now married, and the spouse decides to overstay. Now, I look out, there's a difference between the spouse of a citizen now and the spouse of a permanent resident. Spouse of a citizen, you can end up overstaying and still get your papers. It does not hinder you from getting your papers as long as you enter the country with a visa. Spouse of a permanent resident should not be overstaying, right? So you should not be overstaying if you are the spouse of a permanent resident. They will not approve your green card and it will turn into a mess and you have to wait for your spouse to become a citizen. But in that case, usually, if the spouse of a citizen decides, I want to be with my spouse, I want to build a life here, I don't want to be separated from my spouse, then that option is there as well. That option is there. And a part of that option of staying with the spouse and applying for adjustment of status is overstaying. And so that is where the overstay can be forgiven. So I look for family ties like this. But there are also family ties that are negative, right? So the spouse or the parent or even the adult child, maybe they are the reason for the overstay, but they don't actually move forward with petitioning for the relative, the immigrant relative, because they're being mistreated. That US citizen or permanent resident, spouse, parent, or adult citizen child who's age 21 or older, they're mistreating the immigrant spouse, parent, or child, right? And in that case, they can qualify for what's called VAWA. VAWA does not penalize the immigrant for the overstay. So if they overstayed, um, and the overstay doesn't even necessarily have to be related to the mistreatment, but if they overstayed, happen to get married afterwards, or happen to get into these problems with their parent or their child afterwards, then VAWA is an option despite the overstay. So it's not a matter of saying overstay and you will have an option. It is if you've overstayed already, the damage is done, but I look for alternatives to help you to fix that situation. And this is where the consultation is very important. Now, I don't want you to come to your own conclusions here in this live. I don't want you to say, oh my gosh, I've already overstayed, but none of that applies to me. How I can't fix this. This is where the consultation is important, because I tell you, my best cases have been where the my clients started out thinking there's no hope, but they're going to try this. And they're so shocked by the end of this that they find out that they have an option, that everything that they went through, or a large part of something they went through, entitles them to relief, entitles them to the ability to stay here despite the overstay. So this is where it's important. Circumstances matter, facts matter, and then another thing that so many of my clients say is, when I called another lawyer, they asked me, usually in a very condescending way, was I married to a US citizen? And if not, they usually say, go get yourself a spouse and then you can call back. And I really do think that's very condescending and degrading, because um, nobody wants to get married for papers. Nobody wants to have to make a quick decision to get married to move forward with the papers. Even if your marriage is real, sometimes you want to give your relationship some time before you get into marriage. And one of the best things about the options that I provide for my clients is it is their process. They're not depending on any third parties. They're not having to do any kind of life changing actions because they have to get to the green card faster. They can take their time and get this done through their control, their decision making only. So that's the beauty of what I do, is I present alternatives to clients. So, what I would say here is you need to, if you're going to, you can't just get the work permit after overstaying. So don't have this blasé attitude like, I'm just gonna overstay my visa and get the work permit. Just know that it does not work that way. If you are in a situation where you are afraid to go back to your country for some reason, you need to get, this is where it's so important to get a consultation. because that consultation is going to help me to determine whether there is an option for you. If you overstayed, is there an option? There is asylum. For example, if you're afraid to go back to your country because you are the target of threats, you might be a target of threats because you are a part of a particular social group, could be any kind of group, that easily identifiable group that you're a part of, that is, or not easily identifiable, but an identifiable group that is being targeted in your country. Or you could have a political opinion, or a political opinion could be imputed on you, meaning based on who you are, maybe they assume you're of a certain political opinion. You could be of a particular race or ethnicity, or it could be a form of gender-based violence, for example, like genital mutilation, something of that nature that's making you afraid to go back to your home country. Then asylum could possibly be for you. So that's another thing. The tricky thing about asylum, though, is that you need to make sure that you apply for asylum within 365 days of your entry into the US. Otherwise, you face a steep battle, a steep hill to to um, to you know get your approved asylum, because they're very strict with that deadline. So go ahead, give me a call. Go to the link in the profile, schedule your appointment. Before the key is, before you overstay, check your options. Even if you're here, you could be here for years, check your options, because there are options, alternative options here. But I don't want you to end up overstaying first and then facing the consequences afterwards. Because let me tell you, overstaying your visa, what that means. If you overstay your visa is automatically invalid. The day after you overstay, you don't have a visa anymore. You're gonna leave. If you leave, go back to your country, and you try to hop back on a plane to get back, they tell you your visa is no longer valid because you overstayed. But if you overstay by 6 months now, you're barred. You will be barred for 3 years from coming back to the US. So that means visa canceled and no visa until at least 3 years. And it could be longer, because you're really going to have to earn that visa back again. They're not going to make it easy to get that visa back again. If you overstay over a year, that turns into a 10-year bar. And once again, you're lucky if you get it in those 10 years, because they're going to make it really hard for you to get it back. So you have to think about, if you're going to overstay, you have to understand what your options are. Do you have a justification that would allow you to stay longer than you should to get certain relief or benefit here? That's going to be important. You have the options. If you've already overstayed, this is where you cannot lose here by evaluating your options available. I had a client who was here since 1996. This client didn't even come in by visa. They came in, they were smuggled into the United States, lived here for since 1996 without any kind of papers, no identification. And I was able to obtain status for this client. So it shows you that no matter how long you've been here, there are potential options. But this is where I really sit down and um, delve into your circumstances here. All right. So now I'm going to answer some questions. Go ahead, put those questions in the comments, and I'm going to go ahead and answer them. Hi there, Lexi. Is Trump going to change immigration rules for marriage also? So what I can say here is the last time we saw the changes, he did. And he made it a lot harder, and it was just a really cumbersome process. So, the last time that Trump was in office, we hope that's not going to happen again. This is where, if you're watching, you're a citizen, please make sure you participate in the voting process because it's important. We did it in 2020, we can do it again. Now, with the changes to the immigration rules, he made it very difficult to meet the requirements of the affidavit of support by implementing a new public charge rule. If you remember that public charge rule, you had to submit a whole new form on top of the affidavit of support. And there was a credit check involved. You had to attach your credit score. You had to provide debts that you had, your level of education, they evaluated your age. They've evaluated whether you were, what your employment was, what did your past career, professional life look like, whether you had medical conditions, whether you had medical insurance. And it was basically a balancing test to determine whether, after they evaluate all the circumstances, are you um, are you in a situation, do they think you can, would, after all evaluating all the circumstances, do they think it's very likely you will become a public charge, as in you'll be take on public benefits, right? Like housing assistance or long-term care and Medicaid. So it was a nightmare, and it what it did was it really made it a huge. It made the immigration process uncertain because now you have officers that are making these kind of subjective determinations, this balancing test between whether you're likely to be a public charge based on your entire background. So we could possibly see that come in. We could possibly see worse coming in. There are a lot of things that he's proposing, not only just mass deportations, but he's proposing to make the immigration process a lot more cumbersome for individuals to get visas to come to the United States. For example, he has suggested that people now have to pay bonds to come into the country. So, this is where people then have to have thousands of dollars to pay in bond to get a visa to enter the United States. So, yes, we can expect some changes here to the rules. And while this is what I'm saying, no matter what, I'm going to be here for my clients, no matter what. And I'm going to find the best ways, just like I did during the previous administration. I'm going to find the best ways to continue to fight for my clients as I did back then. Hopefully, we don't have to have these changes. But I would suggest too that you not cower and go hide. Make sure you find your options as well, because it's better to have your options in than not at all. Another thing here is it's best to make sure that these are in now, because usually whenever changes are made, they look forward at future applications. They don't usually go backwards, as in assign it to people in the past. They usually say from this date on, this is going to be applicable to these applicants. So this is where it's like, don't be a sitting duck. Make sure you take action. And even while if we do experience any changes, I am hoping not, but if we experience any changes, this still always evaluate your options, because it's better to seek the relief you qualify for than to hide and not seek it at all. All right. I'm here for 3 years. I'm afraid to go back home because of a social group. So give me a call. No, the thing about this is you're here for 3 years because you're afraid to go back. That's telling me that you may not have applied for asylum within the 1 years. But let's talk, because I need to understand, were there extraordinary circumstances that prevented you from applying for asylum on time? Were there changes to your circumstances that now allow you to apply for asylum, even though you didn't apply back then? And then here we go again with there are, when I'm in the consultations, I have about 20 different questions that I ask my clients. And each of those questions are potential options, alternative options for my clients. So this is where it's important to have a chat, because I need to understand what you're going through, what's happening right now, and could that qualify you here for relief. What's the proof for asylum due to social group? So with the asylum, they are going to determine based on your credible evidence. So they're going to look to determine whether your evidence shows that you're a part of that group. So it's going to depend on what group are you a part of, what articles are there out there, what literature is out there that's available to show that this group is being targeted in your country. So proof is going to vary depending on what the circumstances are. What is considered overstaying? Overstaying the return date or overstaying the visa expiration date? It's a great question, because I've heard some people say, I have a 10-year visa, so my visa has not expired yet. Once you are here, so whenever you enter the country on a visitor's visa, you get maximum 6 months, right? You're not supposed to stay over those 6 months. It doesn't matter that you have a 10-year visa. So a lot of people think that 10-year visa allows them to stay here for 10 years. And that is not how it works. You must leave on the time that the officers give you when you're coming into the country. If you don't leave, then the day after, it's now an overstay. And that overstay means that your visa, you are at a very high risk for your visa being canceled already. It's usually, the law says that it automatically becomes invalid after you've overstayed. And then, in addition to that, if you overstay over 180 days, now it turns into more serious immigration consequences. So don't go by that visa. You have to renew your visa to keep traveling back and forth to the US, but don't go by expiration date when you're here in the US. Go by the date that's on your I-94. Will divorcing an abusive partner after filing a VAWA negatively affect the case? Not necessarily. It depends though, like what's in the filing of the divorce. If there's something contrary to what the evidence you provide, it may. But just divorcing, say you're divorcing your partner because they're being abusive and you just need to escape the situation, it should not affect the VAWA. It's because of health issues I overstayed. Does that work? So now the USCIS just issued a news bulletin, by the way, that says they are willing to forgive. Um, if you've gone over your time, they're willing to consider. Not every case is going to get approved, but consider forgiving that time. Now, if you're doing 10 years after, of course, forget about it if you've overstayed 10 years now. But say you're a couple days off of and you've overstayed a couple days, you can apply to still extend your time or change your status based on extraordinary circumstances. So if you have a health issue that has led you to overstay, then you could possibly qualify for that even after you've overstayed. But I don't know how long you've overstayed for. So that's where those kind of questions come into play. If a spouse overstays, does it affect the other spouse's visa? Possibly. Whenever the officers, especially the immigration officers at the embassy, are considering renewing your visa, they may very well take that into consideration. How long does USCIS take to respond to RFE? I've been waiting for 103 days. So it depends on what you responded to. Sometimes it does take a while. It just depends. Can you apply for a T visa if you have deferred action? Absolutely, you can. I am a DV program selectee and about to fill Form DS-260. Can I add my spouse who I married after the application? So while I don't give personalized legal advice, it's very important for you to speak to an attorney about your particular case. Usually, spouses can be included in the application. However, I don't know what your situation is or whether your spouse qualifies. What's the proof you need to file for asylum due to social groups? I answered that. What if you have your ITIN number to work? So ITIN number, it does offer, it has nothing to do with immigration. ITIN can be beneficial for those who don't have their papers to allow them to work as contractors or run their own business. However, it does not give an immigration status. All right, so I'm gonna come here and just answer some here. I want to get to everyone or get to as many platforms as possible. Thanks for this information. You're welcome. I'm living abroad and visit often. So my fiance is going to apply for citizenship in May. Should I wait until then to get married and then put in papers? So I think this is more on a personal level. You'd have to now keep in mind you can't enter the country with a temporary visa saying you're going to stay. That's one. But I have to understand what your circumstances are to, give you further advice. And this is where the consultation is going to be very important. What does it mean by fee waiver on the receipt notices? So if you sometimes, so the I-765, the I-360, there's no fee when filing the I-485. So when filing the I-485, the I-765, there's no fee, so they put fee waived. Hi there, Maria. And I think Maria, you were asking me about what should you do, schedule a consultation. If USCIS say your I-765 from one location to the next, what does that mean? It just means they're distributing the workload to another service center. Usually the logic is to speed things up. Good morning, my I-485 got approved yesterday, but I-130 is still actively reviewed. Is it normal? No, that's not normal. They may not have updated the I-130 because the I-485 is dependent on approval of the I-130. It's consultation free. There is a fee because it is legal advice that you're getting. So it's $150. Call, schedule, or you can schedule your own by going to the link in the profile. My question is, do you need a declaration on all docs like birth cert to USAG when applying for early AOS? I booked a consultation with you. It's still far away. So that's another thing. Make sure you schedule your appointment. Thanks so much for scheduling your appointment because my schedule is filling up. So please, I want to get to you. I want to help you. And, to do that, you have to schedule early. And it's not going to get better. So just schedule. So we'll talk in the appointment, but do you need to apply early for early AOS? It depends on what stage you're at. So usually to go through the Department of Justice, you do not need all of that supporting documentation to get the early adjustment of status letter. But this is where the representation is going to be very important. I'm a US citizen and my spouse is F1 visa. We don't live together due to work and school. Will that be a problem for the green card application? Make sure you properly document that you don't, the reasons you don't live together, and to show that you spend your time together as a married couple, or you are working together as a married couple despite being separated physically, that you're still working towards a life together as a couple. So it's very important to give the officer the proper snapshot of your life. Now, what is the number to call? It's going right across the screen at the bottom of the screen. Go ahead, call that number on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. What about green card holder marrying overstayed spouse? So the green card holder spouse has to become a citizen for that overstayed spouse to continue the green card process while being here in the US. All right. All right, so I'm going to answer these last questions here and then head out. I got green card through VAWA since April 21. Can I apply for citizenship this year? So if you got the green card through VAWA based on a U.S. citizen spouse, 3 years from the day that you got your green card. F2 holders, we don't work. Can we also get work permits? No. So you cannot get a work permit as an F2, which F2 meaning you're the spouse of a F1 student. How long are I-130s taking? 9 to 12 months. I arrived here with immigrant visa 4 months ago, still no green card. Contact USCIS. I have a question. I have N400 case that has been reviewed since August 16, 2023. You probably will get your interview very soon. I called today, USAs, they told me your case is waiting for interview. So yes. So I just got married. My question is, can my husband file for me online or does he do it the old way? It's going to depend on a number of factors here. Or do you plan to do adjustment of status, work permit, and travel document along with the I-130? If so, it's probably you're going to at least be a partial filing online and paper or just paper altogether. Do I have to file my taxes if I'm undocumented? So the law does say that if you're working, you're making money, you pay taxes. It doesn't matter about your immigration status. That is why they have the ITIN number to help people get their papers. I have a question, so let me see. Parole at southern border, can I adjust through marriage to U.S. citizen? You may be able to, but I would have to look at what kind of parole did you get, because only a special type of parole allows you to do the adjustment of status. And also, have you been placed in removal proceedings, because that's going to complicate it. My green card expires in 2025. How long is the citizenship process? So right now I'm 2 months to 8 months. Do I have to file taxes if I'm undocumented but married with a US citizen? So I answered that. The law says pay taxes no matter your immigration status. Can you change your status after 6 months in the country? Depends on if you qualify. That's where the consultation is going to be very important. Are you located in Florida? Yes. So we are based in Boca Raton, Florida. The great thing is we represent clients in all 50 states and around the globe. So not just Florida. While filing concurrent petition, does the sponsor need to write a letter to explain the situation? I'm not sure what situation you're talking about, but this is where it's important to schedule an appointment and let's talk. How long does it take to get your work permit and social security when a VAWA application approved? Usually right away. We get it like within a week of approval. What if you overstayed with US work visa and now want to get tourist visa? Can you get approved? If you overstayed, it might be harder, but you can change status over. But it can get a lot harder. If you can show extraordinary circumstances were involved in the delay, they might still do that change of status. All right, that's going to be it for me. Thanks so much, everyone, for your time. I'll be back. I'm planning on being back tomorrow where I will continue to answer questions and come with some updates. Remember, if you want to know your options, this is where it's very important to talk to me. because this is what I do. I look at what your current options are. I can advise you about the potential issues related to our options related to any decision you want to make beforehand, so you can make the right decision. And then if you've already overstayed, if you've already you're here, you're without your papers, just know that there still are options out there that I focus on finding in the consultation. So go ahead, schedule now, because my schedule is filling up and I want to make sure that I can help you. So go ahead, call the office or go to the link in the profile to schedule your own appointment. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day. See you tomorrow. Bye.